Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, this is Robert Smigel, founder of Canada's Podcast, where we talk to the entrepreneurs who are making it happen here in British Columbia. Today, our guest is Karen Richard. Karen is a recovering pediatric speech language pathologist, kidlit lover with a nerdy heart, and the CEO and co-founder of Made Live. Based out of Vernon, BC, Made Live is an AI-assisted end-to-end children's book publishing platform dedicated to simplifying the publishing process for aspiring authors. Transitioning from a career in speech language pathology, where books were pivotal tools for developing language skills, Karen ventured into writing and self-publishing her own work, confronted with the complexities, inefficiencies, and gatekeeping prevalent in the industry. Hi, Karen. Welcome to Canada's Podcast, and I appreciate you taking the time to share your entrepreneurial journey with all our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me today. I know speech language pathology is quite the mouthful.
Yes, it's a tough one there. Yeah.
I trip on it all of the time, and I can't tell you how many times I've said it.
Okay, well, I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't know exactly what that is and what you do exactly. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? We know you're in Vernon, BC, which is beautiful up there, and to give us a quick deep dive into your business.
Yeah, so Made Live, as you said, AI-driven end-to-end self-publishing software. So really, as the intro stated, I had really wanted to write a series of children's books. I had a head full of ideas of like 20 plus books that I wanted to write. So time was of the essence, and tried finding a solution that would help us do it faster and more efficiently. Self-publishing, especially your first book, generally takes on average upwards of 5 years because the process is so convoluted. We were looking at wanting to put out about one book every 3 to 6 months, and really couldn't find anything that would help it along. So that's really where everything with Made Live started from. And it was just a matter of figuring out what are the barriers and the pitfalls and the steep learning curves that happen and at what points, and how can we utilize software to make that a lot easier. So it was really born out of, the traditional, like, I'm my own first client. It was something that we wanted to build for ourselves, and then realized that if we needed this is probably something other people would really benefit from as well.
Is that when you made the transition, I guess, from working for someone else and becoming an entrepreneur? Was this the Made Live that made the transition, the segue?
Yeah, it was definitely the impetus. It was a tough thing to let go of. I mean, going into speech pathology, it's a master's degree, so it's 6 years of university. I was working at it for almost 20 years, so being able to step away, or having the confidence or the guts to just walk away from something I'd put so much time into, was certainly not something I took too lightly. But it was pretty obvious from the get-go that it was not possible for me to work a 40-hour work week plus do this and have it, bring it to market within the next 10 years if I didn't really just focus on it. So it really was the tipping point. I tried for a good chunk of time to do both, and it just wasn't feasible.
Some of the skills that you learned while you were employed, did you bring any of those skill sets over to being an entrepreneur? And what did you learn along the way?
Even in speech language pathology, it's a very, science-focused, evidence-based practice sort of a field where you don't do something just because you feel like your gut tells you it's the right thing. It's about, what does the research say? What does the evidence show? I think that idea of, once you're trained as a scientist, it's kind of how your brain continues to work. So a lot of what I still do is very much sort of, show me the data. I want to see the data. I want to make decisions based on data, not just gut. Gut falls into there too, but really, aside from everything around children's books and what makes a good kid's book, because I used books for language development all of the time. It was, the core tenet of most of the therapies I would do. But really, it's just that making sure what you're doing is the best laid plan, not just your best gut feeling, has really been something that's carried over. And I was always somebody that was constantly trying to learn new things when I was in the field, and I really think that has carried over. I don't like to be stagnant.
Okay. Did you need financing to start your company, and how do you make money now?
Yeah, so we were very lucky. My co-founder is also my partner. So partner times two, and had been in startup for a number of years and had a successful exit a couple of years prior to that. So we've really been able to lean on personal financing, doing all of the things they tell you not to do. Use your own personal, your good credit or whatever else to fund the build. That's what we've done, but it's been a very much matter of staying very, very lean. We didn't go out and get office space. We haven't gone out and hired a bunch of people. It's just been nose to the grindstone until we get a product. So I'm happy to say we launched an actual product that people can use in November. So we are now in the process of just sort of soft launch, proving product market fit, making sure that we're making iterations to the software that, it's not just what people said that they wanted, but what they actually want when boots hit the ground and they actually get in there. So we're happy to say we're in revenue. And this is hopefully going to be a really big year where we really test what works and what people love and double down on those things too.
Discover the latest trends, strategies, and success stories in the ever-evolving world of business. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
Give me one piece of knowledge or information about your industry that you can share with our listeners, something that is kind of unique about your industry. And one thing I want to go back to your bio, and something that it really stood out is the complexities, inefficiencies, and gatekeeping prevalent in the industry. So maybe tell us a little bit about the industry, and maybe tell us a little bit about that, and if that is a factor.
Yeah. So, really, it's the benefit of me coming at this from a perspective where I wanted to write the books and I experienced the issues is that I've gone through the same trajectory that a lot of people that our customers will be. So often when you think of publishing, book publishing, especially in children's picture books, you think of, the big five, which became the big four, the big publishing houses. And that is often seen as the only legitimate pathway or the only really, good option to go. But what you find out very quickly is that you can't get in there without getting an agent, and finding an agent is probably going to take you a number of years unless you've got, unless you're the unicorn of the publishing world, or you've already got a massive following. It's an uphill battle to get an agent. And you can't get one usually until you've written something and you kind of know how to sell yourself that way. So a lot of people don't have that background. So if you can't get the agent, you can't get the publisher. So what are you faced with? Well, then you look at self-publishing. Now, how do you write a good book? It's one thing if you're writing, a novel, you can follow certain story arcs, but with children's publishing, your story is half illustrations and half words. So you really should be balancing the images with the text to be able to tell the story and have the reader, who's the child and the parent, entertained and feel intelligent and be intrigued. You can't preach at them. There's all these things of what goes into making a really good children's book. So writing it in and of itself is really challenging because you have to figure out what to leave out so that it can be shown in the images, or what to strategically leave. It's almost like doing a pitch where it's like, you want to plant the seed of like, what question are you asking? Or, what's my lead into my next slide? How do I get them to turn the page? So really that is a challenge in and of itself. And what we're finding now is so many people saying, I wrote this book. I've been sitting on it for, a couple of years. I had one lady had been sitting on her story for over 25 years. And it's incredible. And you can see the images come to life in your head, but that's where people get stuck. They've got this idea or this visualization of this is what it looks like, but I'm not an artist. So what do I do? So now you're stuck at, how do I illustrate this? And how do I do that efficiently and affordably? That's a huge problem. And then, of course, once you get all of that put together, then it's the actual layouts and the formatting and where are you going to self-publish? Is it going to be through Amazon KDP? Is it going to be through Ingram Spark? Are you going to find a local print shop and sell them at fairs and out of the trunk of your car? You really have to know where you're going to figure out the path along the way as well. So it is just learning curve after learning curve, and time and money and challenge at every step of the way.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about, you live in Vernon. What's the long-term vision for your company? Do you see your company expanding into other areas beyond BC or even Canada?
Oh yeah. There's the publishing and self-publishing industries are large. Canada, though, we're a smaller market, but the lucky thing for us is being a software as a service, being a B2C SaaS, we're not really restricted by, provincial boundaries or even boundaries within the country. So our first market is really going after English speaking. So if we've got people who want to jump in and use it that are in the UK, or we've got some people in beta that were in Sweden, there really is no barrier to that whatsoever. And in fact, the English speaking industry is the second largest in terms of the children's picture book market. So once we do what we can do within English, it's a matter of looking at getting into the Asian market, because they're actually the dominant force in children's picture book publishing. So we don't really see our physical location as any kind of a barrier, because we don't need people coming into our store. We don't have any barriers in terms of that. So the beauty of being online is really the beauty and the challenges of being online is that we can be anywhere, and then we can be anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, how do you define success, and how do you celebrate your successes? Do you celebrate by acquiring clients, or moving the needle in exposure, or what would you say would be some big success stories that have kind of given you the idea you were on the right track?
Yeah, I will say, to preface, is I feel like I fall into the pitfall of focusing more on the challenges and not enough on the successes. I think a lot of people kind of breeze over. They go, "Oh, that worked. Okay, on to the next thing." So it's definitely been a concerted effort to take a step back and say, okay, what are the things that went well, and what are the things that are successes? For me, on a personal side, stepping away from my profession was, one of the big first markers. It was, I believe in this enough that I'm going to step back. And then, fast forward a little while later, was actually letting go of all of the registrations and certifications and licensing that I'd been holding on to just in case. I see that as a success. A big one for us was, having beta users who are coming in and going, "This is incredible. How soon can I use it?" And, reaching out to us while we were working on improving the software, saying like, "Is it ready for market? Can I get in yet?" Those kinds of encouragements for, in terms of exposure. Just this past year, we had been part of the Total Mom Pitch, which was a company based out of Toronto, and a founder there who had it set up, and I don't even remember where I saw it, but it was, submit a video of what you're doing in your business. And I think they had almost 1,000 women who submitted, and we made it in the top 100, and then did another video pitch and made it in the top 5. And then had this crazy experience in May of going out to Toronto and meeting a bunch of people and walking a red carpet and pitching on an 80-foot stage in a ball gown, fancy dress pitching, which is something I would have never seen. So, it's a combination of external feedback saying like, okay, this is going well, this is a success, and things that are internal. It's like, if somebody else can see what we're trying to do and the value in it, and the, what people are going to get out of it. And that is very, very encouraging and something I see as success. Obviously, finally launching the product in November was like our biggest success to date. And now it's in front of the eyes and in the hands of more and more people this year. And, we've got certain markers and goals that we want to meet kind of each quarter, each year as well. And it's just a matter of, taking the time, stepping back and saying like, we did it, we did that thing. And yes, we still have to do the next thing, but, give yourself a pat on the back and congratulate yourself and congratulate each other for those things as well.
Canada's podcast is your gateway to success in the world of entrepreneurship. Start listening today. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
So you guys launched in November. I imagine you've been fairly busy since then, obviously. How do you balance work? I know that you're up in Vernon and so forth, but how do you, entrepreneurship's a demanding job. We all know that. How do you balance life, work? Do you have ways of going for walks, exercise, any kind of disciplines that kind of free your mind of being constantly immersed in your business?
Yeah, and especially we predominantly work from home. So that creates the challenge. And I know I'm not unique in this. COVID made us all work from home people too, at least at some point in time. It's I wish I could say I have this like ironclad, amazing routine. It really varies day by day, but I mean, my routine every day is, wake up, get the kid off to school because nothing's happening before that. I have tried being part of the 5 a.m. club. You don't want to see me that day. Like
Yeah.
it does not go well. I wish I was that person, but I'm just not. Once I'm focused on something, that has my attention and I don't divide my attention well. So the morning's got to be, wake up, get ready, get the kid out the door, get the dog for a walk. And that's usually my reset between sort of like home life mom and work life. What are we going to do? And then because I work with my partner, who happens to be my husband, we kick off the day of a quick stand up, just like a lot of big companies will do of, what are we going to do today? What's your focus? What's my focus? What are potential problems we see? Do we need each other? And then a quick check at the end of the day of, how did that go? And just continually sort of keeping that in mind. I've tried various, physical space. It doesn't work always. As a side note, I got a late diagnosis of ADHD. So there's a certain amount of just, I need to find novelty and ways to stay motivated. And sometimes it's don't work from the same location that in the house that you've been working from. Go, work from the couch instead of a desk, or, move to the room, which they say you should never do. But sometimes just that change of venue is enough to keep me motivated and tuned in. So, I wish I was one of those people that was like, this is how I do it. But I just don't. And we do our best when the kiddo is back, from school and around and activities of being tuned in and, not being that parent who's on my laptop during, sports games and whatever else. But I heard somebody say at one point, it's not about work-life balance. It's about work-life integration and figuring out and integrate the two. If you try to balance, it's always what's winning, what's losing. Whereas integration is sometimes something has to take over and that's okay. And the pendulum will swing back. And it's just about how do you merge the two and live your life. And that has been something that I pretty consistently remind myself. It's not about balance, it's about integration.
Okay, Karen, let's learn a little bit more about you. If you weren't doing what you do now, what would you like to do for a profession?
Ooh. Oh, that's a good one.
It can't be anything in your current field.
Yeah, honest, probably like travel writer. Pay me to travel and write. It's still writing related, which is kind of, but I still haven't gone back out and traveled a lot since COVID. But when I do travel, I really love just taking that step back and sort of letting all of your senses take in everything that's different around you. And how would you make somebody, see, hear, touch, taste, feel what you're experiencing at that particular moment? I think that would be really cool. But I would probably end up putting some kind of entrepreneurial spin on it, just because, it's who I am. It's what I come from. My parents are like that. My grandparents were like that. So, I think it's in my blood.
Good. What 2 words would you describe yourself? Give us 2 words to describe yourself and why.
Me, enthusiastic and, broad thinking.
Broad thinking.
I tend to, and again, and maybe it's part of the ADHD, probably is because that's just my brain. Anything new, I attack with gusto and enthusiasm, and it's really hard to pull me away from. That the novelty is just so good. And broad thinking, I tend to I visualize a lot. So I'm very much a visual thinker and how I do everything. So I tend to look at, this is where I am and I go broad and then I try to figure out where I'm going. So I'm always kind of doing a sweeping broad take in of whatever it is, whether it's, I'm at an event or I'm reading a book. I'm not a very, narrow on the track thinker. I'm always kind of divergently thinking about how this applies to a million other things. So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything keeping you up at night these days? Are you the kind of the entrepreneur that can shut it off at night and just start your day fresh, or you just it follows you? Does it follow you?
It follows, it spins. That's honestly been the biggest challenge for me, I'd say, in the last 6 months, is figuring out what's a girl got to do to turn the brain off at night. The things that keep me up at night are usually, it's whatever the problem of the day is that I didn't finish. I really like to start something and tie it with a bow and be done and move on to the next thing. But that's not the way business works. So it's, if I've had to put a pin in whatever I was doing, and I know I'm going back to that, it's usually the thing that my brain just keeps looping on. And it's usually the thing that I have less fun on. So I hate spreadsheets. I don't like crunching numbers. I'm not an accountant for a very good reason. So usually it's anything in terms of budgets and spreadsheets and finance and those sorts of things are usually the ones that stress me out and keep my attention. But sometimes the keeping me up at night is excitement, not just stress. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, you've been an entrepreneur for some time. Is there any advice you've received along the way that you can pass on to entrepreneurs throughout Canada? Has someone said to you anything that has inspired you, whether it be a mentor or an entrepreneur that you've met at a networking event, whatever that looks like, something that resonated with you that you could pass on to entrepreneurs that kind of had an impact on you?
Yeah, I fairly recently was working with an advisor, and I would say more of a non-traditional advisor in that his take on things like fundraising was non-traditional in that, especially as a startup founder, you pick up books or you attend sessions or whatever, and they're always trying to sell you on a playbook or like this is how to do it. But often the really interesting stories are the people who didn't do it that way. And it's like that, yeah, that can work, but that's not always the way it has to happen. So the advice was around the fact that, you're not failing if you're not fundraising, that there's always this mentality that you always have to be fundraising and you always have to be putting yourself out there. But what if you just channeled that energy and effort into building an incredible product and getting to revenue and making your customers happy and, addressing that later? And essentially that has bled into just because that's what works for somebody else, or that's what, the messaging that you're getting from the masses, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what applies to you in your business. For us, software as a service, SaaS, is typically B2B. So a lot of the SaaS supports and information and whatnot is about selling to businesses, and their strategy and their process is completely different than if you're direct to consumer or B2C. So it's been a matter of just being able to apply that and say, okay, here's the advice, but now what of that do I want to take out of it? And I don't have to be trying to shove myself into these rules, quote unquote. There's a certain amount of setting your own that's encouraged and allowed. And I think more people would do well if they just did that.
Mm-hmm.
And go to your own evidence. It's not the evidence of this is what worked for this other company, but your company. So is that the right choice for you? Or is it just generic advice that you're maybe paying too much mind?
Join our thriving community of like-minded individuals who share a passion for success and innovation. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
Would you do anything differently since you started Made Live and you guys are continued on since the beginning? Is there, if you could go back, say a year and go, you know what, I probably would have done this differently?
Back a year, probably not. If I had to go back further, it would probably be to go full on sooner.
Okay.
Get in and tell that if I had to tell myself something, me a few years ago, I would say keep a really amazing mentor as soon as you can, and a consistent one. Mentorship was not something that's necessarily baked into my previous career. You've got management, but not necessarily mentorship. So, I feel very lucky to have a couple really great advisors and mentors now. And they've really come out of the last, say, 12 to 14 months. So it would just be to do that and build those relationships sooner, which is hard to say because a lot of them naturally came out of things that I was doing along the way. So, had I set out to try to find one sooner, I'm not sure how one does that. But mentorship has been really, really incredible for us.
Okay, so you'd recommend that to any entrepreneur that is coming up with
well, especially you really get stuck in your own space, and in your own thought process. So having, fresh eyes, fresh opinions, and sometimes just words of encouragement of like, why not you? Or, you're really smart. You can do this. It's not just telling you what to do, obviously, but it's just that encouragement of like, no, you're on the right path and you're doing the right things. Or maybe have you considered this? It's just been absolutely monumental for me, specifically in the last year.
Okay, we're going to wrap things up here, Karen. How can our listeners get hold of you? Is there anything you'd like to add before you leave us today?
Yeah, if they want to reach out to me, all of our Made Live socials are all at Go Made Live, on all of the big ones. If anybody wants to email me personally, just Karen@made.live. And it's so far a lot of the input we've received and the people that we've interacted with have been, it's always, I want to do this, or my neighbor wants to do it, or my mom wants to do it in terms of self-publishing a children's book. And if they want to, and they're feeling stuck, or they're not sure if we're for them, reach out, send me an email. I'm happy to jump on a call. I'm happy to send emails and chat and help out if we're not the help that they need. I've got a pretty solid understanding of the industry as it goes, and have offered a lot of advice there too. So if anybody's got any questions for me, I'm happy to chat with them as well.
Is that a big market? Do you get approached a lot by a lot of people? I imagine it was like, I have an idea. Do you get that a lot?
Oh, constantly. When people find out what we do, I wrote a book and I haven't done anything with it. My mom did, my sister did, my cousin did. It's just it's always like 1 degree of separation of somebody who wants to do it. So, it really is because, and I think it's any industry that has a lot of gatekeeping. It's people have dreams and they maybe haven't prioritized it because they don't know how to do it. So the idea of like, oh, if this got easier, would you? So,
yeah. What I find interesting too is that, when you look at the history of some of the biggest published books that we see, whether it be Harry Potter or whatever, they were turned down a lot. Like, my question is that you've got this senior executive, head of publishing, years of experience, et cetera, et cetera. The credentials go on forever, and they flat out tell these people, no, it will never work. How does that happen?
Well, I mean, it's because it's one mind, it's one opinion. I mean, what they say about opinions are like, everybody's got one. It is one opinion, and they're a business. They are very similar to VC. Like the parallels are uncanny. So, it's the people with the money at the top who are trying to decide what the next big thing is going to be, or which thing is going to sell 100,000 plus copies. But that's their goal, is to make all of this money because they're very people heavy in that industry. You've got to pay for the agents bring them in, and then you've got your different levels of editing, and you've got your illustrators, and you've got your copywriters, and you've got all of these formatting people at various levels all the way across. So it's a very expensive thing for them to publish a book. So, they have to feel like it's a smart business play, which is why, you're Britney Spears, of course, we're going to publish your book. You're Madonna, you want to write a children's book? Yes, of course. And she will sell just because she's got the name behind her. But, the series of books I wanted to do, which was around language development strategies within the book and help for parents who are stuck on wait lists, because I had, 2-3 year long wait lists of parents who were like, my kid's not talking, I'd like some help. And they didn't know what to do. My ideas were all considered too niche. And I was like, wait, so parents who want their children to develop good language skills is a niche. Okay. Yes, that's a tough sell for you, but maybe not so much for me if I do it directly, and can certainly make more than the sliver that I would make if I published traditionally. So, it's you've got just a few key decision makers, and it's the parallels between that industry and startup and tech and fundraising and finance. It's they have to rely on what they know, and they have to make their smart business decisions for what they think is going to make them the most money, and they miss. Every VC's got a story about the thing that they missed. that
I
they wish.
imagine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
It looks like that's a dumb idea. Next thing you know, it's like, oh my God, how did I miss that? Yeah.
yeah. Well, and it's defining success too, because for the publishing house to make really great money, they want to sell 100,000 copies of a book. But if I self-publish and I'm making far more than the royalties I would get through a traditional publisher, I don't need to sell 100,000 to make the same amount of money. So, it works. I don't think that industry is going to die. It has its place. But the self-publishing industry is booming. There's a reason for that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Karen, thanks for coming on the show. I've learned a lot about you, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks so much.